It was announced that Foreign Minister Maka Bochorishvili made comments on Georgian-American relations. For the first time from the American side, it was stated that Georgia has returned to the agenda of the United States administration. After that, we already saw concrete steps. Numerous consultations were held, including a phone call. There were visits by the Prime Minister both to Washington and to Tbilisi by the State Department. Georgian Vice Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Maka Bochorishvili spoke about this on the public broadcaster in the program Day's Topic. While discussing the ongoing process, Maka Bochorishvili noted that this is the initial stage of consultations, the results of which will significantly depend on future developments. Of course, this can be considered the first stage of consultations and the first meetings of this kind under the conditions of the Trump administration with the State Department. Naturally, a lot depends on how events will unfold and what the results of these consultations will be. At this stage, we can say that the communications and meetings that have taken place so far with the United States can be assessed positively and as productive. This is precisely why we are already seeing the continuation in the form of planned visits that we expect in May, stated Bochorishvili. The minister focused on the visits carried out in April. In April, there was a visit by a representative of the State Department to Georgia. We had consultations. I myself had a meeting with them. Not only me, many meetings were held with various representatives of the Georgian government. The result of this visit was precisely the phone conversation between the Prime Minister of Georgia and the Secretary of State. This is the progress we have in relations with the United States. We have been repeatedly reminded, and it was also noted by the Secretary of State himself, that the legacy the Trump administration inherited in relations with Georgia was not easy, and taking this step was not simple, to reach the point where we could start talking to each other. We are glad that this conversation took place and that it became possible to return to the table and continue discussions on Georgian-US relations. This was a very important, very significant process that we went through from February until today, stated Maka Bochorishvili. According to Bochorishvili, a visit by representatives of the U.S. State Department is planned for May this year, along with meetings with various representatives of the government. In May, there will be a visit by U.S. State Department representatives to Georgia. Meetings are planned not only with me, but also with various branches of the Georgian government. According to the minister, the statements and messages made by the U.S. side indicate a real desire to reset relations. This is already a signal when, at the highest level from the United States, it is stated that there is a desire to reset relations. These are the results of this message that we are seeing, that the United States wants to improve relations with Georgia.
In short, this is lengthy, and I don't want to read more, but the essence is clear. After the elections, the Georgian government had a vacuum in relations with the United States that had existed since the Biden administration period. The United States unilaterally canceled the strategic relationship. During the Biden administration, a lot of dirt had accumulated regarding Georgia, 1,000 kinds of rumors, and all of it was piling up in the U.S. State Department. Marco Rubio and Vance themselves told Kvashilava and Bochorishvili when they met at the Olympics that there were too many stains, and they had to navigate through this darkness before they could restore this relationship. So what should we do now? Should we wave flags and be happy that this happened? Or on the contrary, is it problematic for us that today America is trying to correct the directions of Georgia's foreign policy? I look at this process with great caution, and the impression remains that Georgia is changing its foreign policy course. This is diametrically opposed to the foreign policy course that Ivanishvili announced before the elections. The first point was the restoration of relations with Russia, direct dialogue in Gori, and the grandiose statement, I said it in the previous broadcast and the one before that too, about reconciliation with Ossetians and Abkhazians. This was followed by a terrible wave of insults, calling someone a traitor or something, I don't know what. And now, of course, I am in favor of not wanting war with anyone, especially not with the United States and not with the European Union either. But at what cost and at what price is this restoration of relations with the big partner happening? This has great importance for me. If we look closely,
Meaning the start of the second wave of cohabitation,
at the events and observe that cohabitation has been restored, that is, this restoration and the announced restoration of Georgian-American relations was preceded by the legitimization of this whole crowd, the issuance of a constitutional claim from the court.
Then the disappearance of Sozar and Tsulukiani from the screens.
The sidelining of Tsulukiani and Sozar. These two people led the investigative commission that created very important factual circumstances so that these people, instead of being put on trial, are now playing debate club on screen. All of this together makes me think that we are changing course. I don't know at what price, but we have a cross to bear. Let's recall Haniyeh, the Hamas leader, a political group leader who was a negotiator. He was killed when negotiations began between the United States, Israel, and Hamas. The next group was invited to a meeting in Qatar for diplomatic talks by the Americans and Israelis, but they themselves did not come to the negotiating table. A rocket was fired and they were killed. When negotiations started and they tried to sit at two chairs, they were eliminated.
What is it called?
Iran tried negotiations. First, they killed Qasem Soleimani when coalition negotiations began. They call this saving face. But how much of it was really saving face became clear later. Then they struck an American base, having warned in advance that they would strike. The Americans withdrew their contingent, and only the Kurds remained. Not funny, as if both sides were taking revenge. What revenge? When a guest visiting you is killed in front of you, how can you tolerate that? Later, they couldn't tolerate Soleimani's assassination either. Why was Iran doing this? Not out of unprincipled behavior. Iran was trying to avoid war, but it couldn't avoid it with this approach. And look what Iran received in the end. What I want to say is that I simply do not trust these people. I don't trust them. Although, I repeat, I am not criticizing the government for talking to the Americans, but they should not trust them. And this lack of trust should be expressed by not allowing them to interfere in our politics. Yeah.